For centuries, the Emerald Tablets have been read as mystical texts, accounts of Thoth, fragments of an ancient cosmology, or teachings reserved for initiates. But beneath their symbolic language lies something more precise. There is a structure. Law precedes manifestation. Vibration organizes form. Consciousness interacts with that vibration. Cycles regulate movement. Thresholds determine access. And every cause generates a consequence within the system that produced it. The tablets do not present these operations as isolated ideas. They repeat them, layer after layer, through teachings concerning light, darkness, time, death, consciousness, space, polarity, and transformation. The problem is that when a mechanism is contained within ancient language, the reader can become trapped in the narrative and never reach the law preserved within it. The Emerald Tablets decoded, the structural code of law, vibration, and consciousness was written to penetrate that surface. This book does not worship the symbol. It examines it. It does not turn mystery into religion. It identifies its function. It does not attempt to impose a modern interpretation upon an ancient text. It extracts the mechanisms that repeat throughout the tablet's own system. The central question is not who can quote their words. The question is who can recognize what those words are doing. When Thoth speaks of the fall of Atlantis, we are not presented merely with the memory of a lost civilization. We are presented with a model of collapse. When knowledge becomes separated from balance, the structure sustaining it begins to destroy itself from within. When he descends into the Halls of Amenti, we do not encounter only a description of the invisible world. We encounter an architecture of transition, chambers, guardians, levels, evaluation, and regulated access. When the tablets speak of light and darkness, they are not presenting two simplified moral forces. They are describing states of knowledge, perception, and frequency. Darkness limits, light reveals, and movement between them requires a genuine transformation of consciousness. The book examines each tablet through a 5-layer structural method. First, it establishes what the text states. Then it extracts the mechanisms that appear literally within it. Next, it compares their functions with patterns found in other traditions, without merging cultures, identities, or systems. It then determines their relationship to the Hermetic Laws. Finally, it converts the identified structure into an operational model that can be recognized and applied. This method makes it possible to distinguish between superficial resemblance and genuine correspondence. Not every similarity proves a historical connection. Not every figure performing a similar function represents the same being, and not every symbol must be merged with another to produce meaning. Correspondence must be classified. There may be direct transmission. There may be probable historical diffusion. There may be archetypal equivalence. Or there may be functional identity, the same mechanism operating under different names. This precision protects the analysis from exaggeration and makes it possible to observe something more important than a collection of symbols, the continuity of structure. Across the 15 tablets, the reader will find a reconstruction of the system governing their internal architecture. Vibration is not presented as a decorative expression. It is the fundamental movement that determines the state of form. Consciousness does not appear as a passive observer. It participates in the orientation, perception, and reorganization of experience. Time is not reduced to a line moving forward. It operates through cycles, recurrences, and patterns that continue until knowledge intervenes. Death does not appear as annihilation. It is described as a transition governed by law, consciousness, and vibratory state. Space is not treated as an empty and motionless expanse. It is presented in layers conditioned by frequency, density, and resonance. Freedom, therefore, does not mean escaping all structure. It means learning to operate within law without remaining subject to ignorance of its mechanisms. The book also reconstructs the 7 Hermetic principles and adds 2 principles necessary to complete their function. Intention, directed will that organizes and amplifies the vibratory pattern. And being, the fundamental consciousness that exists before thought, role, and constructed identity. Mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, gender, intention, being. These 9 principles form a functional network. They are not commandments or dogmas. They describe relationships that can be observed within consciousness, nature, human systems, and the repetition of cycles. Understanding a law does not mean memorizing its name. It means recognizing when it is operating. A person can speak of cause and effect while continuing to produce the same causes. A person can speak of vibration while remaining governed by states they never examine. A person can study rhythm without recognizing the pendulum directing their decisions. A person can pronounce the word consciousness while continuing to live through automatic responses. Knowledge acquires power only when it changes the operation. That is why this work was not designed as passive spiritual reading. Every analysis leads toward function, recognizing cycles before repeating them, distinguishing a threshold from a barrier, understanding when a structure has lost its balance, observing how intention concentrates force, identifying the relationship between internal state and external consequence, examining identity before allowing conditions to define it. The tablets do not promise an existence without law. They teach mastery within law. They do not promise that consciousness will avoid every cycle. They teach that whatever remains unconscious will continue to repeat itself. They do not present wisdom as the accumulation of information. They present it as alignment. Mystery does not mean that truth is absent. It means that truth exists in layers, and that each layer requires a proportional capacity to perceive it. One chamber contains another chamber. One answer reveals a deeper question. An initial understanding may be correct and still remain incomplete. Premature certainty stops access. Disciplined consciousness expands it. That is the purpose of this decoding: to remove the fog without destroying the depth, to preserve the text without remaining subordinate to its surface, to separate the source from the interpretation, to distinguish the statement from the analysis, and to reveal the operating system that remains once the narrative ornamentation has been removed. The result is a work for those who no longer wish to contemplate ancient teachings from a distance. It is for those who need to understand how they function, for those who recognize that the same structures appear within individual life, in the rise and fall of civilizations, in the formation of identity, in the repetition of relationships, and in every system sustained or destroyed according to its degree of alignment. Law does not change because someone ignores it. The cycle does not disappear because someone cannot see it. Consequence does not need to be called punishment to fulfill its function. And consciousness does not achieve sovereignty simply by declaring itself free. Sovereignty requires recognition, discipline, and conscious operation. The Emerald Tablets, Decoded, the Structural Code of Law, Vibration, and Consciousness by D.S.E.A, does not offer another mystical interpretation to be added to a collection. It offers a structural map, a system for understanding vibration, consciousness, cycles, thresholds, and the law organizing their consequences. The tablets have endured because the structure they contain continues to operate. The language belongs to another time. The law does not. The book is available on Amazon. The link is in the description.